A struggling single dad walks into a powerful CEO's company just to help his daughter, but when the CEO tells him, "You're not qualified," he notices the one failure her experts completely missed. What begins as an insult turns into a quiet fight for truth, trust, and a second chance neither of them expected. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Miles Renner had learned to enter expensive buildings like he was apologizing for taking up space. He didn't look weak. He had the kind of tired face men get when they work all night, pack school lunches before sunrise, and still smile when their child asks if everything is okay. But at 41, with a faded navy jacket, work boots, and a visitor badge that kept flipping backward on his chest, he looked invisible inside the glass headquarters of Renpath Mobility. That morning, he had not come there to prove anything. He had come because his daughter, June, had been accepted into a private mobility trial. June was 9, bright-eyed, careful, the kind of child who said, "I'm fine," too fast because she knew adults became quiet around pain. Years earlier, an early walking assist brace had malfunctioned during therapy and left her terrified of machines that promised miracles. Miles had never forgiven himself for signing the consent form. So when Renpath announced a safer new device, he said no at first. Then June touched his sleeve and whispered, "Dad, I don't want fear making my choices." That was the sentence that brought him into Celia Wren's world. Celia was not cruel. That was what made her harder to hate. She was controlled, polished, and precise, with dark auburn hair pinned neatly at the back of her head and eyes that missed almost nothing. She ran her company the way some people held a glass near the edge of table, steady, but always aware it could fall. The trial demo was supposed to be private. One child, one prototype, 5 engineers, 2 clinicians, and Celia herself watching from behind a line of screens. But the moment the young test patient took her third step, the brace locked. A soft alarm pulsed. The girl froze. Her mother reached forward, but the clinicians calmly supported her. No one panicked. Not openly. Miles saw panic anyway. He saw it in the engineer rubbing his jaw, in the clinician's shallow breath, in Celia's fingers tightening around her tablet. "Reset it," Celia said. They reset it. The brace failed again. The lead engineer blamed the firmware. Another blamed sensor drift. Someone mentioned humidity. The room filled with intelligent words that did nothing for the little girl standing there with fear slowly draining the color from her face. Miles stayed near the wall until June slipped her hand into his. "Dad," she whispered, "it's doing what mine did." That sentence moved through him like cold water. He looked again, not at the brace, at the floor. The failure happened in the same place each time. Same step, same angle, same tiny flicker in the heel sensor before shutdown. Miles took one step forward. "Check the floor panel under her left foot," he said. The room went quiet. Celia turned slowly. "Excuse me." Miles swallowed, but he did not step back. The brace is reading a false surge. It thinks the heel sensor is unsafe, so it locks. The lead engineer gave a polite, exhausted smile. "Sir, we appreciate the concern, but this isn't a home appliance." Miles looked at him, then at Celia. "I know." Celia studied his badge. "You're here as a parent." "Yes." "Then please let the qualified team work." The word landed harder than she meant it to. June's fingers tightened around his. Miles could have stopped there. Years ago, he might have. He had spent a long time letting rooms like this decide his value based on clothes, job titles, and a gap in his resume where grief had swallowed his career. But the child in the brace was staring at the floor like it had betrayed her. And Miles knew that look, so he lowered his voice. "I used to diagnose failure chains in adaptive motion systems. Before I became a full-time single dad. Before hospitals and insurance calls became my calendar." Celia's expression changed, just slightly. Not belief, but attention. Miles pointed gently toward the demo track. "That panel isn't original. The metal trim is newer than the others. If your grounding strip was replaced with the wrong material, the brace won't fail in testing. It'll fail only when weight, angle, and static charge line up." No one spoke. The lead engineer crouched reluctantly. He lifted the edge of the panel. His face lost its confidence first, then his voice. "Celia," he said quietly, "he's right." Celia didn't look at the engineer. She looked at Miles. For the first time, not through him. At him. June looked up at her father with wet eyes and a small, proud smile. Miles exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. Celia stepped closer, her voice lower now. Mr. Renner, how long did you know? Miles looked at the frightened child in the brace. Since the third step, he said, but I was hoping someone else would say it first. Celia Wren did not apologize in front of the room. Miles noticed that. She thanked the clinicians first, asked the mother and child to sit comfortably, told the engineers to document the grounding issue, and shut the prototype down until every demo track in the building had been inspected. Her voice stayed calm, but Miles saw the damage behind her eyes. This was not a small mistake. The device was scheduled for a hospital board presentation in 48 hours. Investors were flying in. Families were waiting. Children like June were hoping. One wrong launch could turn hope into another kind of harm. When the room began to empty, Celia walked toward Miles and June. I owe you both a private conversation, she said. Miles expected a legal warning. Maybe a polite thank you and a request to stay quiet. Instead, Celia led them to a smaller room with soft chairs, a window overlooking Boston's gray morning streets, and a shelf filled with framed drawings from children who had tested earlier devices. June walked straight to the drawings. Miles stayed near the door. Celia noticed. You don't trust me. Miles gave a tired half-smile. I don't know you. That's fair. The honesty surprised him more than any apology would have. Celia set her tablet down. You were right about the grounding strip, but that replacement happened yesterday. Only 4 people approved access to that floor. Miles looked at her. You think someone did it on purpose? I don't know yet. That was the first quiet twist of suspense. Not dramatic. Not loud. Worse than that. Possible. June turned from the drawings. Dad. Miles softened immediately. It's okay, Bug. Just grown-up work talk. Celia's expression flickered when she heard the nickname. Something warm crossed her face and vanished. You said your daughter used to walk with one of our older systems, Celia said carefully. Miles looked away. June answered before he could protect the wound. It scared me, but Dad made me practice again with rails at home. He said fear can sit beside me, but it doesn't get to drive. Celia's eyes lowered. For the first time that morning, her confidence looked less like pride and more like armor. My younger brother used a mobility device, she said. Not ours. This was before the company. He hated being treated like a project. I built RenPath because I wanted children to feel like people first. Miles listened, but he did not soften completely. Then don't launch a device your team doesn't understand, he said. Celia absorbed it. No defensive as might. No executive speech. You're right. The words sat between them. Miles had expected her to fight him. A rich CEO protecting her image. A polished woman embarrassed by a single dad in work boots. But Celia was doing something harder. She was listening. A knock came at the glass door. The lead engineer, Priya Shah, stepped in with a laptop tucked under her arm. We checked the access logs, Priya said. The floor panel was opened at 11:43 last night. Maintenance badge, but the video feed cut out for 7 minutes. Celia's face went still. Miles felt the room change temperature. Who requested maintenance? She asked. Priya hesitated. It came through an internal account. Whose? Priya glanced at Miles, then back at Celia. Yours. June went quiet. Celia didn't move. Miles watched her carefully. A guilty person might rush to deny it. Celia didn't. She stared at the screen, breathing slowly, as if forcing panic to stay outside her body. I didn't request it, she said. Priya nodded. I know. You were at the donor dinner. There are photos. Miles looked from Priya to Celia. Then someone used your account. Celia's jaw tightened. Or someone wanted it to look that way. The company suddenly felt less like a glass palace and more like a locked room with too many shadows. June came back to Miles and pressed against his side. He placed a hand over her shoulder. Celia saw it. That protective instinct. That quiet loyalty. And for a second, her eyes softened in a way that made Miles look away first. Not because he disliked it. Because he felt it. That was dangerous. He had spent years building a life where love meant responsibility, routine, and never needing more than he could safely hold. Celia Wren, with her guarded eyes and hidden ache, did not fit into that careful life. But when she looked at him now, she was not looking for rescue. She was asking for truth. "You saw the failure pattern faster than anyone here," she said. "I need someone outside the company to review the chain before the board presentation." Miles almost laughed. "You want me to help you? I want you to help the families waiting on this." That stopped him. Celia took a breath. "I was wrong to say you weren't qualified." Miles looked at June. June gave him the smallest nod, like she understood more than any child should. Miles turned back to Celia. "I'll review it, but not for investors, not for headlines. And if I find something ugly, I won't help you bury it." Celia held his gaze. "Good," she said. "Then we understand each other." But as Priya opened the laptop, another alert flashed across the screen. The hospital board had just received an anonymous safety report. Attached to it was Miles's name. And one sentence asked him what happened to his daughter. Miles stared at the sentence until the words stopped looking like words. Asked him what happened to his daughter. June read it too. Her hand slipped out of his. That hurt more than the message. "June," Miles said softly. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, not afraid of Celia, not afraid of the company, but afraid of the old story being dragged into a room full of strangers. Celia closed the laptop halfway. "No one here is going to use your daughter's pain as a weapon," she said. Miles looked at her, expecting the polished CEO voice. It wasn't there. She sounded angry, but not loud. Protective. Priya stepped back, uncomfortable. "I could trace the report." "Do it," Celia said, quietly. Then she looked at Miles. "You don't owe me an explanation." Miles breathed in. For years, people had filled in the blanks for him. Careless father, angry parent, failed engineer, man who blamed a company because life had been unfair. The truth was simpler and heavier. "I designed adaptive systems before June was born," he said. "Not for Renpath. Smaller company, different device. After her injury, I became obsessed with safety flaws. I found a recurring shutdown issue in early home use braces. I reported it." Celia listened without interrupting. "They settled quietly with families," Miles continued. "Then the company folded. My name got tied to the complaint like I was the problem, not the person trying to stop it." June's voice trembled. "Dad didn't do anything wrong." Miles turned to her. "I know, Bug." "No." Her small face tightened with years of watching him swallow insult after insult. "You say that like you know it, but you still act like you're guilty." The room went silent. That landed deeper than the anonymous report ever could. Miles looked at his daughter, and for the first time that day, his composure cracked. "I should have protected you better," he whispered. June shook her head. "You did. You stayed." Celia looked away toward the window, but Miles saw her blink hard. That was the moment something shifted between them. Not romance like music swelling in a movie. Something quieter. Respect becoming tenderness. Two people recognizing the same loneliness in each other and not turning away. Priya returned 20 minutes later with the answer. The anonymous report had come from Harold Keene, Renpath's retiring operations director. He had approved the last-minute floor repair. He had also been pushing Celia to delay the launch and sell the company's patent rights to a larger medical corporation. He wasn't trying to hurt a child, Priya said carefully, but he wanted the demo to fail. Miles's expression hardened. "That's enough." Celia stood very still. This was her company, her name on the building, her mistake, even if someone else had made the worst choice. "What are you going to do?" Miles asked. Celia picked up her phone. "Cancel the board presentation." Priya looked shocked. "Celia, investors will. Families first," Celia said. Miles watched her then, really watched her. No performance, no speech, just consequence. By evening, Harold Keene was suspended pending an independent investigation. The hospital board received a full safety disclosure, including the compromised demo floor, the false report, and a promise that the device would not move forward until outside reviewers cleared it. Celia asked Miles to be one of them. He almost refused, not because he didn't care, because caring had cost him before. They stood in the empty demo room after June had fallen asleep on a sofa in Celia's office, wrapped in a company blanket with little blue wheels printed on it. The floor panel had been removed. Underneath, wires and metal strips lay exposed beneath soft white lights. Celia stood beside him, sleeves rolled to her elbows now, no longer looking like a woman built for magazine covers. She looked tired. Human. You could have protected yourself today, Miles said. Blamed Harold. Kept the presentation. I thought about it, she admitted. He appreciated that more than a perfect answer. And she looked toward the office where June slept. Then your daughter said you stayed. I realized I've been building devices for children while forgetting they're listening to every choice adults make. Miles smiled faintly. That's annoyingly wise. Celia gave a small laugh, the first real one he'd heard from her. It warmed the cold room. A week later, Renpath reopened the trial under stricter rules. Miles joined as an independent safety consultant, not as a favor, not as charity, but because his skill had finally been named correctly. June returned too. This time, when the brace powered on, she looked at her father first. Then at Celia. Is it okay to be scared? She asked. Celia crouched to her level. Yes. Scared means your heart is paying attention. Miles added, but fear doesn't get to drive. June smiled. She took one step, then another. The room stayed quiet, not because people were waiting for a miracle, but because they understood the size of an ordinary, brave moment. Celia's hand brushed lightly against Miles's. Neither of them pulled away. Outside, the Boston rain had stopped. Sunlight spread across the glass floor in pale gold lines, and June kept walking through them, slow and steady, like the future had finally learned how to wait for her.